This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. You can visit their store by using my referral link in the description below. Hi everyone, I'm Nizzanotes, and it's Saturday. That means it's time for Nizzanotes, my weekly vlog series about limited Magic. This week we're talking about some big limited news, starting with Murders at Karlov Manor, which is the first standard release set of 2024. Starting that year, they're getting rid of draft boosters and set boosters and replacing them with something called a play booster. This is kind of a hybrid of both of these kinds of boosters. And in this video, I want to, talk about this announcement, what it means for limited, talk about why they're doing this, and talk about the pros and cons, I guess, of this new system. The good news is, the most important thing that I think I should stress is that limited's going to be fine. So, draft isn't going to end because I got rid of something called draft boosters. Initially, hearing the news, draft boosters are no longer going to exist is a little scary if you're a limited player, but we're still going to have limited. So let's move ahead here with the video and start with why it is they're doing this. Well, the biggest answer anytime a company makes pretty much any decision is to make more money. That's the broad reason that they're doing this. But there are some more specific reasons that they're doing this, and why doing this, why they think doing this will make them more money. One of the problems, apparently, is that the set and draft boosters were easily confused by people. And, I don't blame people. I think the idea that there are collector boosters and set boosters and draft boosters is a little excessive, personally, anyway. As someone, most of Magic's history, there was one kind of booster pack. You could always draft that booster pack. But, that's kind of how I preferred it. I'm not that big into collecting, and I'm not that big into, non-limited formats. So all the other kinds of boosters out there, for me, it's already pretty excessive. And they are getting rid of, they're narrowing the number of boosters there will be, I guess, with this system. But the fact that they had these multiple kinds of boosters was confusing people. It was easy for people to tell a collector booster was different because they cost like a gajillion dollars, right? Whereas set and draft boosters have a similar price point. They look very similar too. They come in the same kind of booster box. Like everything is very similar. So people were confusing the two, so sometimes people would buy a set booster or set boosters and try to do a draft, but set boosters, for some reason, don't have the same number of cards in them as a draft booster does, and so this was creating issues. So that's sort of like the micro reason down to the customer, individual customer. One of the reasons they're doing this, just to simplify things. And then the other reason, if we sort of move up in the supply chain, I guess, up to the local game stores and smaller markets in general, a lot of them had to decide which kind of booster pack they want to get. And generally speaking, the set boosters are apparently selling better, and they contain more cards that are potentially valuable than your typical draft booster does. So it makes sense. So a lot of stores and smaller markets were just buying set boosters to sell, and that meant that they didn't have draftable boosters in their store. So for me, this is a more important reason. Like this one matters to me because basically what they're saying is limited wasn't as accessible as it should have been. Again, if they just had one kind of booster pack, that would solve all of this, but obviously the collector boosters are selling or they wouldn't be selling them. But anyway, so it wasn't as accessible for people. You couldn't go to any game store in the country and they would have draft boosters. So you couldn't just, fire up a draft at your store. And not just in the country, in the world, I should say, because when I say smaller markets, I mean, other places other than North America and so forth. And that for me is a problem. And it was creating problems too for store owners who, had to make decisions that would keep the store open, which often meant not having draft boosters at all because, the whole idea behind a draft booster is the only reason you buy it is to draft. So that already sort of narrows why anyone would buy them. So people were buying them less, and thus stores were getting less draft boosters, and limited wasn't accessible enough. So that to me matters. It is still coming down to they want to make more money because obviously the draft boosters aren't selling well, so you may as well get rid of the product. But, you know, for me, limited being accessible is pretty important. So those are the big reasons that they're doing this. And, you know, overall, they make sense to me. Let's look now at how these new boosters are going to work, what's different about them. So like I said, these play boosters are sort of a hybrid of what a set booster was and what a draft booster was. In other words, to be more like a set booster, these booster packs are going to contain more fancy cards, you know, foils and cards from the list and stuff like that. But to be more like draft boosters, they're going to be draftable, unlike set boosters. So that's kind of where we are. So we have the whole breakdown for how this is going to work. So a play booster, here are how the slots work. Slots 1 through 6 are always commons. That's pretty much what we're used to. Nothing to note there. Slot number 7 can be another common from the set that the booster's from, or they can be from the list. Now, if you play limited mostly, you may have no idea what the list is, but this is sort of a curated list of cards from their cards throughout Magic's history that get this sort of special The List reprint and can appear in set boosters, you know, which are no longer going to exist. But this means you can open a pack and have a card that, you know, is not from the set at all. It's sort of like a bonus sheet slot, which we've seen a lot of lately, except it's less curated. Like the list is hundreds of cards. It's not just like 60 cards, like, you know, the Wilds of Eldraine bonus sheet and things like that. So that slot is going to have some variance where it can just be a random card from the list. I don't honestly think that's a bad thing. I think adding more variance in terms of like replay value in limited is good. Like it makes you want to draft a set more when you have a random slot like this. It's not clear. I don't think they've announced how often it's a common and how often it's a card from the list. But suffice it to say, sometimes you're going to have a card that is not from this set, and it's going to seem kind of random sometimes. It's how playable it is will vary wildly because a lot of the list cards are for like Commander and stuff like that too. Slots 8 through 10, uncommons. That is pretty much unchanged. That's where we're staying, and that's good. Now, things start to get a little interesting. Slot number 11 is a rare or mythic rare. I mean, I guess that one's not interesting. But what gets interesting is that there's potential for more rares in these packs. You can get up to 4 of them total because you've got this normal rare slot. It is possible that the list card is a rare. And then you also have a non-foil wild card and a foil wild card, both of which can also be rares or mythics. So the wild card isn't quite as wild as it sounds. That sounds like almost like what you'd think the list would be because it's a wild card, but it's not. It can be any card from the set that you're drafting. So it's just kind of another card. It could be a common, it could be an uncommon, it could be a rare, it could be a mythic rare. But the non-foil one obviously is always non-foil. Some of them are going to be the cool treatments. Like if you're into those, you can get them now in these draft boosters, something we didn't used to get. That's something that the set boosters contribute to this new hybrid booster pack. So, you know, sometimes there'll be like Phyrexian language and stuff like that. So, and then obviously the traditional foil wildcard is always a foil. So, and it can also just be anything from the set. So the chances that you get a rare or mythic rare with these, you know, is not insignificant, but it's not like you're going to always do it. Like there's potential for up to 4 rares per pack. You're not going to get them very often. I don't know what the percentage would be, but I would guess something like 1% of the time you'll get 4 rares or mythics in a single draft booster. So yeah, but there is a wider distribution of rares between the list, these wild card slots, and your normal rare, mythic rare slot. There's also a basic land slot, which, you know, those are important, not so much for limited as they are for constructed players. You know, you want land to be accessible, so it's probably unavoidable that there's a land slot in booster packs, especially because this will be replacing set boosters. So you'll have this basic land slot. They may or may not, you know, we've seen in the past, they sort of play with this slot sometimes in some sets by putting in non-basic lands or snow lands or things like that. I'm sure we'll see things like that as well. But then the 15th slot is always not a real card. You know, it's a token, an art card with signature. These are the things you can get out of this non-playable slot. So, yeah, that's how these boosters are going to break down. So how is this different? To sort of sum up, they have a little thing on this article that I'll also put on the screen. So obviously you have the potential for 4 rares or mythic rares. That isn't usually the case. In the sets lately, like where we had both like a modal double-faced card, not modal, but any double-faced card, a regular rare slot, and then also the bonus sheet slots, we did have the potential to get 3 in packs. So 4 isn't as crazy as it sounds since you're not getting them all the time, but it is more. There is 1 less playable card because instead of there being 14 cards and then a basic land, we've got 13 cards and a basic land. There are fewer commons. It'll be interesting to see how that impacts things. Commons are usually really important in limited, but having 3 fewer, we will still have a lot of them. It'll be interesting to see whether they change the breakdown of the set so that you still have like the same chance of seeing a given common, but there are fewer commons. And then you've got those 2 wild card slots. And then, they do tell us 1 in 8 opportunity of getting a card from the list. That's what it is. So pretty significant. 1 in 8 opportunity of getting a card from the list in that 1 slot. So that's how it breaks down. So what does that all mean for us? What does it mean for limited? Well, like I said at the beginning, limited is going to be fine. Limited isn't going to die because of this decision. I'm sure some people are saying it will. There's always knee-jerk reactions in the community about change. And there are bad things about this. Let's start first. I have some pros and cons I do want to talk about here. Let's start with the bad stuff. Let's get the negative out of the way. The most problematic thing for me is that these booster packs cost more. Because now they're going to include, they have a higher expected value, right? They're going to cost more than a draft booster, which was the cheapest kind of booster you could buy because, they only usually have 1 rare, etc. These are going to cost more. And that's a problem. It bothers me a little that they're saying, part of the reason they're doing this is to make limited more accessible, but then they're also saying, by the way, these are going to cost more, so limited will be less accessible. Whether that means anything on Arena, we'll see. I really hope they don't change the price on Arena just because of this change. That would make me pretty mad. I mean, I'm addicted to limited, so I'm not going to stop. But it would be annoying. But it does change in paper, and that matters. So, you'll have, theoretically, stores will be getting boosters that are draftable more often, no matter where you live in the world, but they're also going to cost more. So that's a big problem. I also don't love the 1 less card per pack thing. It's not a huge deal. Like, this is a much smaller deal than the price of boosters for drafting going up, but it matters. When I initially saw like 1 less card per pack, I was like, well, they're probably getting rid of the basic land and that's what they mean, right? No, we still have the basic land and we get 1 less card. And like I said, I do think that matters. Most limited formats, by the time you get to the last card in the pack, that card doesn't, it's usually awful, right? But having 15 cards makes it so the decisions are slightly more interesting overall, I think. It makes the draft process slightly more interesting, not in a big way, because again, the card that they're cutting is probably a card that nobody would have wanted to play anyway. So, but I still like having more cards, more options, more choices, etc. So those are the big cons I see. Those are the things I don't feel good about this change. There are some other things where I'm sort of in the middle, and I'm interested to see how it works out. Namely, fewer commons. Like, what's that going to mean? I can't tell you. Like, that's not something where I look at it now and I can tell you it's a good or a bad thing, or that I feel good or bad about. But I could see it mattering. But there are some things I do feel good about. One of them that is encouraging when you read this article is that they've been testing this for a really long time. Like, almost from the beginning, when they introduced collector set boosters and draft boosters, they kind of realized they had a problem, which, I agree, even though I don't necessarily agree with this solution. And so they've been trying to figure out how to fix it. They've been, starting with the Karlov Manor set, they've really, really been testing how the limited format plays with all of these changes. One of the big things they address in the article, because, this is something people always complain about in limited formats, especially limited formats with lots of rares in them, right? And that is, people being concerned about there being too many rare and mythic rare bombs. And they specifically note that they are, altering design some to account for that sort of thing. But in general, the fact that they're doing this much testing and been doing it for so long and been really fiddling with the numbers and trying to figure out the right way to do this makes me feel reasonably good about this decision overall. Could they mess up? Could they, it happens. There was only so many people at Wizards of the Coast who are testing this. Could they have messed something up? Maybe. But the fact that they've done their due diligence is enough for me to say, okay, well, I feel reasonably good about this change then. And then the other really good thing, and I already referenced this, that I think is good anyway, is, we having this, the list slot, as sort of a bonus sheet slot, sounds pretty interesting. I mean, it means we'll have these in every pack. Again, they're not going to be, well, not in every pack, like we said, 1 in 8, but they're going to be around. And that adds some more sort of interesting spice and variance to your drafts, where you can just have like a random worm coil engine or something, from the list in your pack. That'll be kind of fun. You'll sort of smile when you see this old card or whatever that isn't even in standard, but, might be fun in your limited deck. Like, I think that's good. So yeah, those are the things. That's what's happening with this new kind of booster. Limited will survive. It's going to change a little. It's hard to predict exactly how much it will change. We'll see as we move into 2024 and next year. I mean, all the sets are going to have these sorts of boosters. For now, I feel reasonably confident that it's a change that won't hurt Limited actively, apart from the whole higher price point thing, which that's really the biggest problem with this to me. But overall, feel good about the change. I'm not worried that this is going to drastically impact Limited in any way. Limited will change, like I said, but it's not going to be like you're playing a completely different format or anything like that. Things are just going to be a little bit different when you open those boosters. All right, so that is my take on the whole booster situation. Let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree. There's a lot of discussion about this out in the community, and there should be, because it's changing something that's been the same for quite a while. Really, since Limited, they started designing for Limited back in Mirage Block. Like, we've had 15 card boosters as our booster packs, and they've basically had the same rarity breakdown that we're still used to today. Mythic rares didn't used to exist, of course. Foils didn't used to exist. There's some differences, but this is the biggest one that we've seen since Mirage Block. And that is, from 1997 to today, boosters have pretty much looked the same. Won't be true anymore in 2024. But I think Limited will be fine. All right, so that'll do it for this video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like it and share it so that others can enjoy it too. If you want to make sure you catch future videos, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to go the extra mile in supporting me and the channel, you should do so by checking out the description, where you can find a way to become a patron or a channel member. Thanks for watching.